There's a specific moment when you realize that no matter what you do, some people will never approve. Not because you're doing anything wrong, because their approval was never about your actions. It was about their expectations. And those expectations were designed for someone you were never meant to become. It's a liberating realization, and a terrifying one. Because once you understand that pleasing everyone is impossible, you face a choice. Keep trying anyway. Or accept that being disliked is the price of living authentically. Maybe you've stood at that crossroads. Maybe you're standing there now. That moment when you realize that the version of yourself that makes everyone comfortable is also the version that makes you miserable. When being liked requires so much self-editing that there's barely any self left. When the cost of approval has become higher than the cost of disapproval. And you wonder if maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop performing. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid being disliked. They soften their opinions. They hide their preferences. They apologize for taking up space. They twist themselves into shapes that don't fit just to avoid the discomfort of someone's disapproval. And society reinforces this. Be agreeable, don't make waves, fit in, get along, as if harmony is more valuable than honesty, as if being liked is more important than being real. But here's what psychology reveals. The need to be universally liked isn't kindness, it's fear. Fear that if people see who you really are, they'll reject you. Fear that your authentic self isn't acceptable. Fear that disapproval means danger. And your brain, designed to protect you, treats social rejection like physical threat. Research by neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger shows that social exclusion activates the same pain centers in the brain as physical injury. Being disliked doesn't just feel bad. Your nervous system processes it as harm. So avoiding disapproval isn't shallow. It's survival instinct. But what worked for your ancestors in small tribes doesn't work in a world where you can't possibly please everyone. What if being disliked isn't failure? What if it's evidence that you're living honestly? When you spend years prioritizing other people's comfort over your own authenticity, something happens to your sense of self. At first, the accommodations feel small. You agree with an opinion you don't share to avoid argument. You laugh at a joke you don't find funny to fit in. You pursue a path you don't want because it's what others expect. Small compromises, reasonable adjustments, nothing that seems worth making a fuss over. But over time, those small compromises compound. Your real opinions get buried under the acceptable ones. Your actual preferences disappear behind what you think you're supposed to want. Your authentic self becomes so hidden that you start forgetting what it even looks like. And the version of you that everyone approves of becomes a performance you can't stop giving. Because stopping means disappointing people. And disappointing people feels like failing. Psychologists call this the false self, the persona you construct to meet external expectations while your true self remains hidden. And here's the cruelty of it. The more successfully you perform the false self, the more praise you receive. People love the agreeable version, the accommodating version, the version that never challenges or contradicts or demands anything. So your brain learns that authenticity is dangerous and performance is safe, that being yourself costs approval and hiding yourself earns it. And the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be grows wider every year. This pattern usually starts in childhood. Most people who struggle with the need to be liked learned early that disapproval had consequences. A parent's anger when they expressed the wrong emotion. A teacher's disappointment when they didn't meet expectations. A peer group's rejection when they didn't conform. Small moments, repeated over years, and the child learns a lesson that embeds itself deep in their nervous system. Being myself is dangerous. Being what others want is safe. My worth is conditional on their approval, so they learn to read the room, to sense what people want before speaking. to edit themselves in real time to match the social requirements of any situation. And by the time they reach adulthood, this self-monitoring has become so automatic they don't even notice they're doing it. They genuinely believe the performed version is who they are, because the authentic version has been hidden for so long it feels like a stranger. Here's what research on authenticity and well-being reveals. Studies show that people who live according to their own values rather than others' expectations report significantly higher life satisfaction. Not because they don't care what anyone thinks, but because they've learned to separate other people's opinions from their sense of worth. They understand that disapproval is information, not verdict. It tells you about the other person's preferences. It doesn't determine your value. Psychologist Carl Rogers called this unconditional positive self-regard. The ability to maintain a stable sense of worth that isn't dependent on external validation. Not arrogance, not indifference to feedback. Just the recognition that your worth is inherent, not earned. And that inherent worth doesn't increase when people approve, or decrease when they don't. This is what gives certain people the courage to be disliked. Not that they enjoy disapproval, but that they've stopped treating it as evidence of unworthiness. We live in a culture that confuses being liked with being good, that treats popularity as virtue, that measures success by how many people approve of you. Your ancestors lived in communities of maybe 150 people. Disapproval from the group could mean exile, which could mean death. So your brain evolved to treat social rejection as existential threat. But you don't live in that world anymore. You live in a world where you encounter thousands of people, most of whom you'll never see again, where someone's disapproval has no material impact on your survival, where being disliked by strangers on the internet means absolutely nothing about your actual life. And yet, your nervous system still responds as if every disapproval is a life-threatening rejection. So you twist yourself into impossible shapes, trying to be acceptable to people whose opinions don't actually matter, sacrificing authenticity for approval from people who will forget you by tomorrow, living according to standards you don't even agree with just to avoid the discomfort of disapproval. There's a particular loneliness that comes with living for others' approval. You can be surrounded by people who like you and still feel fundamentally unseen. Because they don't like you, they like the version you've performed for them. And deep down, you know the difference. You know that if they saw the real you, the one with contradictions and imperfections and opinions that might upset them, they might withdraw that approval. So you keep performing, keep accommodating, keep shrinking yourself to fit their comfort. Behind every "I don't want to cause problems" is a quiet truth. I don't trust that I'm acceptable as I am. I believe my authentic self would be rejected. I've learned that being liked requires not being myself, and most of the time, that trade feels necessary. Until one day, it doesn't. Not rebellion, exhaustion, not arrogance, self-preservation. Many people who develop the courage to be disliked aren't naturally confrontational. They're often deeply empathetic. They care about people. They want harmonious relationships. But they've realized that harmony built on inauthenticity isn't actually harmony. It's performance. And performance, no matter how skilled, eventually becomes unsustainable. They've learned that being liked for who you're pretending to be feels emptier than being disliked for who you actually are. Because at least the dislike is honest. At least it's directed at something real. And here's what most people don't understand until they experience it. When you stop trying to be universally liked, something unexpected happens. You don't lose everyone. You lose the people who were only there for the performance. And what remains are the people who can handle your authenticity. The ones who don't need you to be smaller, quieter, easier. The ones who appreciate complexity instead of demanding simplicity. The ones who value honesty more than comfort. Those relationships are different, deeper, more resilient, because they're built on truth instead of accommodation. What's rarely discussed is how much courage this requires. Not the dramatic courage of grand gestures, the daily courage of small authenticity, of expressing an unpopular opinion when it would be easier to stay silent, of setting a boundary when saying yes would keep the peace, of pursuing what matters to you even when others think it's foolish, of being yourself when being someone else would earn more approval. That kind of courage doesn't look impressive from the outside. It looks like stubbornness or difficulty or not caring enough about others' feelings. But from the inside, it's the hardest work there is, because every act of authenticity requires overriding your nervous system's alarm. The one that says disapproval equals danger. The one that equates being disliked with being unsafe. The one that's been protecting you your whole life by keeping you acceptable. Research on authenticity and psychological health shows something profound. People who live authentically don't experience less stress. They experience different stress. The stress of disappointing others. The stress of standing alone. The stress of knowing some people will misunderstand you. But they don't experience the particular stress of self-betrayal. The exhaustion of constant performance. The emptiness of being praised for someone you're not. The slow erosion of not knowing who you are anymore because you've spent so long being what others wanted. And when given the choice between external disapproval and internal betrayal, they choose external disapproval. Not because it's easy, because it's honest. So if you're someone who's tired of performing, who's exhausted from being agreeable, who's starting to wonder if being liked is worth the cost, you're not broken, you're waking up. You're not being selfish, you're being honest. Maybe the shift isn't learning to care less what people think. Maybe it's learning to care more about what you think. Maybe it's recognizing that universal approval is impossible. And pursuing the impossible means sacrificing the actual. Your actual thoughts, your actual feelings, your actual life. Maybe it's understanding that some people will dislike you no matter what you do, and that their disapproval says more about their expectations than your worth. Maybe it's accepting that being authentic means being misunderstood sometimes. And being misunderstood is still better than being invisible, because living for others' approval isn't sustainable. Eventually, you run out of yourself to sacrifice. Eventually, the performance collapses. Eventually, you realize that the person you've become to keep everyone happy is someone you don't even recognize. And you face a choice. Continue the performance until there's nothing left, or risk disapproval for the chance at authenticity. The people who matter won't need you to be perfect. They'll need you to be real, not agreeable, honest, not accommodating, authentic, not universally liked, genuinely yourself. So when you feel the pull to edit yourself, when you notice the instinct to perform instead of be, when you catch yourself seeking approval at the cost of authenticity, you're not failing, you're at a crossroads. There will still be moments when disapproval stings, when you wish you'd just stayed quiet, when you wonder if being yourself was worth losing people who couldn't handle it. That's okay, that's not weakness, that's grief. And grief doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're human enough to wish people could love both versions, the authentic one and the acceptable one. But there will also come a day when someone sees you clearly. All of you. The parts that are easy and the parts that are difficult. The opinions that align with theirs and the ones that don't. The version you show the world and the version you usually hide. And they choose you anyway, not despite who you are, because of who you are. And you'll realize that one person who loves your truth is worth more than 100 who loved your performance. Maybe that's the deepest truth about the courage to be disliked. It's not about not caring. It's about caring about the right things. Not about being liked, about being known. Not about approval, about integrity. Not about fitting in, about being whole, not lonely, free, not rejected, honest, not disliked. Just no longer performing. Until then, walk gently with yourself. You don't need everyone to like you. You need to like yourself enough to stop pretending. And that courage, quiet as it is, changes everything. If this resonated with you, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching this. Are you in a quiet room where authenticity feels like a distant dream? In a city where everyone's performing and you're tired of the show? In a moment of your life where being yourself finally feels more important than being liked? Drop a comment below, tell me where you are, and if you feel brave enough, share the one thing you've stopped pretending about, the mask you've started removing, the performance you're done giving. Because somewhere in the world, someone else is reading your words and realizing they're not alone in this quiet revolution. The revolution of choosing truth over approval, of being disliked for who you are rather than loved for who you're not. That's the courage. And it starts with one honest word, yours.